Hello, and everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, a show I do twice a week where I throw a little chaos into Star Trek by reviewing a random episode. And today's episode is D Space Nine, Season 2, Episode 24, The Collaborator. And so it starts off with like a dreamlike sequence, and we see Vedic Burrell, and he's walking. Uh, he's in the temple or the temple, and he walks out on the promenade and sees a body hanging from the promenade, from the upper level, and um, then he sees Kira, and she's like playing. They call it spring ball, but it basically looks like tennis. Or she's kind of, practicing with the ball. And he looks at the body and tells her to help him. And uh, she looks at him, and you see the body on the ground, and it's Prelok Beck. And she says, "No, it's not him. It's you." And then so the camera pans back, and we hear that, or we see one of the orbs, and he closes the orb, and that's the end of the teaser. So then, after the credits and the theme, we see Burrell looking out. He's in Kira's quarters, and he's looking out into space, out the porthole, and Kira's there, and they had spent the night together, and it's the morning time now, and Kira wants him to stay a little bit longer, a few more days, and he says that's a great idea. Why don't they do that? And she says, "Well, you can't do that because there's an upcoming election for Kai, and you're sure to win." And they have a little back and forth conversation about how he says that he's not 100% sure. And she says, "Well, is that why you came here, to bribe me for a vote?" And they're kind of sort of joking and stuff, and uh, they're playing around and stuff. But then we pan to Vedic Wynn, who is on the station talking to some kids, and Kira and Burrell come up to her, and they're exchanging, I wouldn't say pleasantries, they're more like insults, I guess. And because they clearly don't like each other, and she clearly has a different agenda. And then Kira asks if she's planning on withdrawing, and she says no. And she asks why she's here on the station, and Wynn says that basically he's like, "That's none of your business," and or it's not for me to reveal the prophet's will to you. And uh, then says that, well, we should provide better security because last time you were here, you caused an uproar. And they're basically just bickering at each other back and forth, which they often do, especially her and Kira. but Baral doesn't like her either. So in the background, we see an old man, an old Bajoran man, and somebody bumps into him. Another Bajoran bumps into him and recognizes him and says that he was a collaborator. He accuses him of working with the Cardassians, and his name is Kudus or Kudos, something like that. Reminds me of Governor Krotos. I didn't even get that one right. So Odo recognizes him and uh, he asks him why he's here. He says something along the lines of, "The last time I saw you, the last time I heard you were living on Cardassia." He says that he wants to come home now, and Odo says Kodos. That's what I was thinking of, Governor Kodos. Uh, Odo says, "Welcome home, and you're under arrest." So then we see another orb vision where Wynn is there and announces Burrell as the new Kai. And then we see Vedic Opaka, and she hands him these ancient texts, sacred texts, and all this weird stuff. Then Odo visits Kudos in the holding cell, and they have a conversation about the stuff that he did during the occupation, where he was basically working for the Cardassians, and uh, then Kira shows up and he requests to go to Cardassia, and she says that the request is denied, and that the assembly had basically anybody that worked with the Cardassians during an occupation are not allowed back on Bajor. The assembly had already decided that prior to him even showing up. And then she talks about how when the Cardassians needed new people to go to the mines, he would sign off on the orders, knowing that it was basically a death sentence. And then she asks him if he ever refused to sign, and he says no. So she basically says that he deserves worse than what he is getting right now. Then Wynn visits Cisco, and she's worried about her perception in the assembly and among the Bajorans. Her perception between her and Cisco, and Cisco reminds her that last time she was there, she caused an uproar. She said that she didn't trust the Federation or something along those means. She says she was uneasy with Cisco being the emissary, and just basically they were at odds with each other. And Cisco talks about how maybe this newfound, maybe she's changed her mind. She talks about how she had her concerns, but she feels better now about the situation and wants Cisco to go in front of this assembly and sort of show that they are in are not at odds with each other, in agreement. And he says that he'll do that in 2 weeks after a Kai has been chosen, and she tries to manipulate him into going now. He says that it wouldn't be appropriate. It would look like he's endorsing her, uh, when in fact he is more supportive of Burrell. And I just wrote in my notes, manipulative bitch, because that's what she is. And throughout the series, she's always like that. So then she agrees to meet with him after the choosing is over. So then we see Odo in his office, and he calls up Kira and says that Kubus was granted was able to leave the station, and granted permission to go to Bajor by Kai Wynn. And Kira contacts Dax and says to not let that ship leave. Keep the docking clamps on. So then Kira goes to Odo's office and asks, she wants more details about what happened. And they're going through the records, and the records have been, the Cardassians. She had gone through Odo's computer to search for information, and when talks to Kira, so there's something, she's up to something basically. I forget the exact details of what she did, but she's up to something. So then Wynn talks to Kira and tells her to let her ship go. And Kira says that she's free to leave, but Kudos is a high security risk, and that they would have to do a security sweep of her ship and all this stuff, then it would take a few days. And then Wynn has this sort of tells her that Kudos is giving information about this Max, giving information about who ordered this massacre, or who gave the Cardassians information about this rebel group that they massacred. And supposedly it was Beck who initially they had thought that Beck was the one that did it because he committed suicide. And then, but now new information has come to light that they think Burrell was actually the one that gave the order, or gave up the information. Who ordered the code red? So then, so he's getting sanctuary in exchange for that information. And then when Kira basically accuses her of doing like this power, just basically like it's a power move, so she can become Wynn, or Kai, I mean, and she wants Kira to lead the investigation. Kira is obviously is okay with that because she wants to clear Burrell's name, and she says that no matter the information, whether she finds that Burrell is guilty or not, she will give Kira or Wynn the information. But in exchange for doing this, she says to keep it on the down low, until the investigation is done, which she agrees to do. Um, then Kira asks Kudos about Prilek Beck and what what he knew or what was going on, and he tells this story about how Burrell came to see Beck after this happened, and they were yelling at each other privately. He didn't know what they had said, what was being said, but then it was shortly after that Beck killed himself. And Kira argues that that's not enough to say that Burrell, was the guy that gave up the information. And then Kira asked Burrell himself if he had visited Beck, and he says yes, that Beck was troubled and wanted counsel, and he had talked to him about his troubles, and then Kira asks what they talked about, and he says, "Well, I can't divulge what we talked about. That's private information." Then we go back to Odo's office, and Kira's there, and Odo says that the Cardassians had burned all communications after leaving the station, so they can't get any help there. So they search the Bajoran assembly files, and they're Kira has a worried look on her face, and Odo asks what's wrong, and she says nothing, and he says, "You're worried that what if he is guilty?" She says yes, because I'm in love with him. And then we see, of course, this is the beginning of Odo being in love with Kira, and he doesn't want to express those feelings, so he kind of changes the subject. And so Odo finds some information that the assembly had sealed the communications. And Kira asks, well, who would have the authority to do that? Or maybe Odo asks that, and Kira says that only a Vedic has that kind of authority. So then Odo and Kira visit Quark. Quark is counting out money to one of the Dabo girls, and of course he wants to short her like 2 or 3 bars of latinum or whatever. So they come to him. He asks what they want. He says, "What do you want from me?" And they want him to bypass the security seal on the the assembly logs files, and he says that would be illegal, and also it would be sacrilegious because it's the Vedic. And Kira says that I'm sure the prophets won't mind this one time. And they're basically trying to, Quark is trying to cover his ass, and he wants like a court ordered, signed document, and Odo's just like, just do it. And this is where we get a rule of accusation, where he says he's a firm believer in rule of accusation number 285: no good deed ever goes unpunished, which is often the case, at least in my experience. So Quark agrees, says it's going to take a while, and basically tells him to go away because Odo's like all up in his face. Uh, then Odo and Kira are talking for a little bit. Odo calls them over, says, the good news is that I was able to get the files, but the bad news is the files, all the messages have been erased. So then Kira talks to Chief O'Brien and tries to get him to see if he can, uh, recover the files. And he says that he, excuse says that uh, he can't recover it. It would be like fragmented, and it would all be digital. So, I mean, it's all like it would take too long, and it would you wouldn't be able to really see anything. But he says that he might be able to recreate the retinal scans that would have allowed the Vedic to do it in the first place. And so he reconstructs the retinal scans, and it turns out it's Burrell. So then again, we get another sequence where Burrell is using an orb again, and Beck shows up. He says, "I trusted you," and then he's like making out with Kai Wynn, or with Wynn, Vedic Wynn, and she says, "You will be rewarded." And then Kira shows up, confronts Burrell, and stabs him. And then he falls to the ground. He closes the orb back up. So then Kira confronts Burrell, and Burrell confesses to telling the location of the rebel base. Sounds familiar? Star Wars? um, and basically says that if he hadn't have done this, the Cardassians were determined to find, to find this base, and they were going to kill like 12,000 civilians if he didn't do it. So then Kira is angry and says that Wynn was right all along, and Kira goes to report her findings, and Wynn basically already knows what's up because Burrell had withdrawn his candidacy for the choosing, and Kira looks at Dax, and she says she's confused. It doesn't make sense. He's an honorable man. He wouldn't have done something like this, and asks Chief to go back into the records, the archives, and then back on Bajor, Wynn she becomes the new Kai and tells Kira to tell Cisco to postpone the meeting. So that just shows her her being a snake in the grass. She had agreed previously to meet with Cisco to show that Bajor and the Federation are on friendly terms, and then as soon as she becomes Kai, she postponed the meeting. Probably never even had the meeting. I don't remember, but then Kira waits for Burrell to show up and says that you forgot to erase the transport files, because the transport files show that he was nowhere, not around when all this stuff went down. So he was guilty, and she says that you must have been covering for somebody else, and then she deduces that it was Kai Opaka she was covering for because she had a son in the rebel group that was massacred, and she basically gave up the information and had her son killed in order to save the civilians. Uh, and I gave this one a 6 out of 10. It's a decent mystery. I think it almost could have been a two-parter, in my opinion. Uh, and I'm a sucker for mysteries, so I'm good with that. It moves along the story, the relationship with Kira and Burrell. It it puts Win as the new Kai, and ultimately she's a antagonist. Sorry, uh, and Louise Fletcher was great. She, of course, famously played Nurse Ratchet. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and was a great villain there. So I'm glad that they chose her. Uh, and it just shows for good storytelling, good writing. Maybe you could say 6.5. Because, a 5 out of 10 is like average. And this is above average. I saw on Wikipedia, I think, where it said that people said that it's a must-watch episode, and I would agree. Like, as far as if you want to, if somebody says if you want to understand Deep Space Nine and the political intrigue and the religious intrigue and stuff, this would definitely be in the list because it's the progression from Burrell, who the it's meant to the audience is meant to like him. He's a nice guy, an honorable guy, to uh, Kai Wynn, who probably knew all this stuff in advance and probably set the whole thing in motion in the first place. Basically, there's other episodes where she does manipulative shit too. So good episode. Not much science fiction going on. Not really. There's not even a B plot to be had. It's just a straight up investigation story. Sort of like there's one where not Data, Odo is he has this whole investigation with this alien lady. And they end up hooking up and stuff, but there's no B plot per se in that one either. And they don't all have to have a B plot. So overall, good, decent episode. Not like the greatest in the world, but decent. And the Michelle Fairy Tales is here. It says Happy New Year's. Happy New Year's to you. It's good. It's so far so good. It's only one day. So now we get to the portion of the show where fate will choose the next episode. If I can open my phone. Alright. As you can see, we're still on Collaborator, so nothing changed there. Press the randomize again button. See where we got. Oh, another Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine again. Season 1, 15 progress. If it's season 1, it's not likely to be a good one. When I watched this episode, The Collaborator, as soon as it started, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that one. Uh, but this one, I don't remember. I know that I've seen it, but don't remember. I don't remember. I usually skip over the first 2 seasons if I'm doing a rewatch. Just a straight through. So anyway, another Deep Space Nine episode added to the list, uh, and that'll be next Thursday. I won't be here Wednesday because of work, but I will be here next Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you, Michelle Fairy Tales, again for coming out. You're here every night. Uh, I know that Price of Reason is doing Knight Rider tonight, I think. So go check that out. Um, that's going to be it for the show. I also want to thank anybody that's been lurking or sees